For even the smallest clue that might reveal the culprits, hours crawled by filled with nothing but the usual flickering lights and shifting shadows. Just as Miguel considered giving up for the night, a familiar figure appeared on the screen. It was Cardinal Luis Antonio. The cardinal moved with purpose, completely unaware of the camera capturing his every action. What happened next left Father Miguel frozen in his chair, his heart racing in disbelief. 2 weeks earlier, the town was alive with excitement. Word had spread quickly. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle was coming to visit their parish. The news ignited a spark of anticipation in everyone, from the devout churchgoers to those who rarely set foot inside. His reputation for compassion and humility had reached far beyond the church walls, making him a figure admired by all. The days leading up to his arrival were a flurry of preparation. The pews were polished, the courtyard swept clean, and decorations carefully arranged to honor such a distinguished guest. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that everybody has a wonderful start of the new ecclesiastical year. Welcome back to St. Sophia's. Today we're here, with the help of Cosmos Philly, to show you what's the newest thing going on here at St. Sophia in terms of our church, Father Miguel announced. Families began arriving hours before the service, eager to secure a spot close enough to see the cardinal in person. The church filled quickly, and soon even the courtyard overflowed with people craning their necks for a glimpse of the man whose presence seemed to carry a sense of hope. Father Miguel stood by the main entrance, fidgeting with his collar. Despite the cool evening breeze, his palms were damp with nerves. He had met Cardinal Tagle before, but this occasion felt different, more significant. The burden of the recent burglaries weighed on the parish, and Miguel silently prayed that the cardinal's visit might bring some much-needed relief. The sound of gravel crunching under tires signaled the arrival of the sleek black car. Miguel took a deep breath and stepped forward. As the vehicle came to a stop, the cardinal emerged, offering his signature warm smile and a slight bow to the gathered crowd. "Your Eminence." Miguel greeted, bowing deeply. The cardinal's presence seemed to ripple through the crowd like a wave of calm. Parishioners who had been tense and reserved due to the recent crimes now greeted each other with warmth and optimism. It was as if his arrival alone had lifted their spirits. Inside the church, the cardinal moved through the sea of people with ease and grace. He shook hands, offered blessings, and spoke to each person with genuine interest, making them feel seen and valued. Father Miguel watched from the edge of the crowd, filled with admiration. Despite his high rank, Cardinal Tagle carried himself with the humility of a servant. His charisma was as natural as the air he breathed. Yet, as Miguel observed, something caught his eye. Clara, the church housekeeper, stood near the side aisle. Normally quiet and composed, she seemed unusually tense. Her hands fidgeted nervously, and she kept glancing toward the cardinal with an expression Miguel couldn't quite place. Was it fear, concern, or something else entirely? It was subtle, but it unsettled him enough to make a mental note to speak with her later. For now, though, the focus remained on the cardinal and the transformative energy his visit brought to the parish. Little did Miguel know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew. Clara lingered in the shadows near the sacristy, her hands clasped tightly together. Her gaze flitted nervously toward Cardinal Tagle, her posture rigid and tense as though she were bracing herself for a moment she dreaded. When the cardinal finally moved closer, she hesitated for a brief second before stepping forward. In a hushed tone, she whispered something to him, her words inaudible from where Father Miguel stood. The cardinal nodded slightly in response, his face a mask of calm, revealing nothing of the exchange. Without another word, Clara turned and exited the room abruptly, her pale face etched with an emotion Miguel couldn't quite decipher, fear, perhaps, or guilt. Whatever it was, it unsettled him. Miguel's stomach churned as he tried to make sense of what he had just witnessed. Clara had always been composed and discreet, never drawing attention to herself. Yet here she was, behaving in a way that seemed entirely out of character, especially in the presence of someone as respected and revered as Cardinal Tagle. Miguel attempted to brush off his unease, chalking it up to nerves over the day's important events. But the memory of Clara's fleeting words and the cardinal's cryptic response refused to leave him. A nagging suspicion gnawed at the edges of his mind, hinting that their interaction carried a significance he couldn't yet grasp. As the evening progressed, Miguel tried his best to focus on his duties, greeting parishioners and ensuring the cardinal's visit unfolded smoothly. Still, his thoughts kept circling back to Clara. What could she have said to the cardinal? Why had she appeared so rattled? Miguel pushed these questions aside, determined not to let his own overthinking spoil what should have been a joyous occasion. It was nearing midnight when the shrill buzz of Miguel's phone shattered the silence of his modest bedroom. Startled, he fumbled for the device on his nightstand, squinting at the screen through blurry eyes. The caller ID displayed the name of the security company responsible for monitoring the recently installed cameras at the church. A cold knot of anxiety formed in his chest. After weeks of uneventful surveillance, a call at this hour could only mean one thing: trouble. "Father Miguel," came the operator's calm yet urgent voice. "We've detected some unusual activity on the church premises. You may want to review the footage from camera 3 near the east corridor." Miguel hung up, his heart pounding. Pulling on a jacket over his nightclothes, he hurried toward the small office where the security monitors were housed. The church was eerily silent, its long corridors cloaked in shadows. Moonlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting fractured colors onto the floor, but the beauty of the scene did little to ease Miguel's growing unease. Once seated in the glow of the monitors, Miguel navigated to the footage from earlier in the evening. At first, the screen displayed nothing out of the ordinary: empty hallways, locked doors, and the stillness that always settled over the church after hours. But as the timestamp crept past 11 p.m., a figure emerged from the shadows, its movements deliberate and cautious. Miguel's breath caught in his throat. The figure stepped further into the frame, and the dim light revealed the unmistakable form of Cardinal Luis Antonio. Miguel leaned closer to the screen, his pulse quickening. The cardinal's movements were deliberate, almost furtive, as though he were wary of being seen. He paused every few steps to glance over his shoulder, scanning the darkness with a wariness that didn't match the composed, benevolent man Miguel had seen earlier that day. Miguel's chest tightened as he watched the footage unfold. What was the cardinal doing wandering the church at this hour? The more Miguel watched, the more troubling the scene became. The cardinal's actions were precise, almost as if he was searching for something or someone. Miguel couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more to this late-night excursion than met the eye. And as the footage continued, what he saw next left him gripping the edge of the desk, his unease now fully transformed into alarm. As Cardinal Tagle approached Clara's quarters, he paused just outside her door. His hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitating for a brief moment. He glanced down the dimly lit hallway one last time, ensuring no one was watching. Satisfied that he was alone, he turned the knob and slipped inside, disappearing into the room. Father Miguel sat frozen, his eyes fixed on the monitor. His mind raced, struggling to reconcile the image of the respected and revered cardinal with a man moving so covertly. A wave of doubt and confusion washed over him. His first instinct was to give the cardinal the benefit of the doubt. Surely there had to be an innocent explanation for his actions. But the secrecy, the cautious glances over his shoulder, and the odd timing, all of it gnawed at Miguel's resolve. He replayed the footage, scrutinizing every detail. The cardinal's movements were deliberate, almost calculated. His behavior wasn't just cautious, it was methodical. Miguel leaned back in his chair, his unease growing with each passing second. The late hour and the cardinal's choice to visit Clara's room, of all places, didn't make sense. What could he be doing in Clara's room? Miguel muttered to himself. He tried to brush aside the darker possibilities creeping into his thoughts, but they clung stubbornly, refusing to be silenced. His rational mind sought explanations. Perhaps the cardinal needed something urgent from Clara, or maybe he was delivering news best handled in private. Yet the evidence on the screen suggested otherwise. There was an undeniable air of secrecy in the cardinal's every move. After 30 minutes of replaying the footage and reaching no satisfying conclusion, Miguel turned off the monitor and rubbed his temples. He resolved to keep an eye on the situation, gathering more information before jumping to conclusions. Deep down, though, a gnawing unease lingered. The cardinal's actions hinted at something far more complex than Miguel could yet comprehend. He tried to shake the feeling as he left the office, but the church's corridors seemed darker than usual, the silence more oppressive. Miguel told himself he was doing the right thing by waiting, but a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that his hesitation might come at a cost he couldn't yet foresee. Father Miguel's steps echoed solemnly through the ancient corridors of the Church of St. Isidore, each footfall seeming to stir whispers from the dusty stone walls. A once vibrant parish tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city, the church had recently begun to draw attention, not for its services or charity, but for the eerie occurrences that unfolded under the veil of night. At the center of these mysteries was Cardinal Tagle, a man cloaked not only in ceremonial robes but in layers of secrecy that thickened with every passing sermon. It was Clara, the choir director, who first voiced concerns. Soft-spoken and meticulous, she had served the church for over a decade, her loyalty unquestionable. But over the past several months, her routines had become laced with unease. Sheet music would go missing, returned only days later with strange markings, symbols foreign to any known musical notation. At first, she dismissed them as pranks. But then came the night she stayed late for practice and heard voices. Not Latin chants, but guttural, fractured syllables whispered from the crypt below. Clara brought this to Father Miguel with trembling hands and eyes wide from sleepless nights. He listened carefully, never interrupting her stream of frightened words. Though skeptical, he trusted Clara's integrity and decided to investigate. That night, he descended into the crypt alone, a candle his only companion. The air grew colder with each step, and the silence was suffocating. Near the altar of Saint Sebastian, where the bones of old bishops lay, he found the remnants of melted wax in a perfect circle, ritualistic, too precise for coincidence. The scent of burnt incense lingered, not the sweet kind used in Mass, but something more acrid, more ancient. What disturbed him most, however, were the footprints. Several pairs, some large, some curiously small, all barefoot. They vanished into the darkness beyond the chapel's known foundation, where no official church blueprints claimed any passage should exist. Miguel returned to his quarters shaken, but resolved. He needed answers. Over the following weeks, he monitored the church's schedule, noting which clergy stayed late and which ones left early. Cardinal Tagle, he observed, frequently excused himself during evening vespers, slipping away into the vestry only to return flushed, his eyes dilated as if from strenuous effort or overwhelming emotion. Tagle's sermons also began to change. They grew heavier in tone, filled with obscure references to divine judgment, ancestral sin, and resurrection, not of the soul, but of forgotten powers buried by the early church. The congregation noticed. Attendance began to dwindle. Some parishioners whispered that Tagle spoke in tongues behind closed doors. Others claimed to hear unholy music drifting from the bell tower at midnight, melodies that made their dreams bleed into waking hours. The altar boys were particularly disturbed. One, barely 13, quit abruptly, muttering about the watchers in the vestry mirror. Another collapsed during Mass, clutching his chest and screaming in a voice not his own. Clara continued her quiet vigilance, collecting sheet music and marking times when the strange symbols reappeared. Her notations aligned too neatly with the church's bell tolls, specifically, the ones that occurred at 3:13 a.m., long past when any human hand should ring them. With mounting dread, she and Father Miguel agreed to stake out the church on All Souls' Eve, a night steeped in ancient superstition. At 2:45 a.m., they hid behind the choir loft, cloaked in darkness. At precisely 3:13, the bells began their unholy toll. From their vantage, they saw a procession. Hooded figures emerged from the crypt, moving slowly, reverently, toward the altar. At their center stood Cardinal Tagle, holding a chalice that shimmered with a dull, green glow. He chanted in a tongue that defied recognition, and the others echoed his words in harmony that seemed to reverberate not through the air, but within the bones of the watchers. Clara gasped, and the figures turned. Miguel pulled her back, but not before one of the cloaked men raised a hand, bearing a ring with the insignia of the papal curia. The ritual halted. Tagle barked a command, and the figures dispersed into hidden passages behind the altar. By the time Miguel and Clara reached the sanctuary, they were gone, leaving only the chalice behind, now empty but warm to the touch. They reported their findings to the diocesan office, but were met with silence and redirection. Files went missing, and their inquiries were buried beneath bureaucratic pretense. Clara was demoted. Miguel found a formal reprimand in his mailbox, citing inappropriate surveillance of clergy. But they didn't stop. Instead, they turned to forgotten texts in the church's library, dust-covered tomes dating back to the Inquisition. There, Miguel uncovered references to the Congregatio Umbrarum, a clandestine sect within the church devoted to preserving forbidden rites. The descriptions matched what they had witnessed. As Miguel dove deeper, Clara visited the nearby monastery, speaking to Brother Anselm, a hermit scholar long believed mad. He confirmed their fears. Tagle is not the first, he croaked. But if he completes the rite, he might be the last. They seek to awaken the fifth choir, not angels, but echoes of what came before creation. Creatures that sing existence into unraveling. Father Miguel and Clara crafted a plan. They would confront Tagle during his next ritual, armed with consecrated salt, ancient prayers, and the resolve of those who knew fear but refused to bow to it. On the night of confrontation, thunder split the heavens. The storm masked their entrance into the crypt, where they found Tagle mid-incantation, the chalice now pulsing with inner light, veins of crimson and emerald dancing within its liquid contents. Clara tossed the salt, disrupting the circle. The light in the chalice flared, and screams not of this world tore through the air. Tagle turned, face contorted, eyes black with a depth that did not reflect the flicker of candlelight. "You know not what you defy," he roared, voice layered with others, male and female, human and not. Father Miguel stepped forward, holding a relic, a shard of Saint Isidore's bone wrapped in rosary beads. This house was built for the Lamb, not the Leviathan. He began the exorcism prayer, words stumbling from his mouth but gaining strength with each verse. Tagle shrieked, backing into the altar, the chalice spilling and hissing as its contents touched the sacred stone. The hooded figures reappeared, but faltered at the sight of the relic. Clara sang, a hymn of old, one not heard since the schism of Rome and Constantinople. The stone beneath their feet trembled, and the hidden passages convulsed as if choking on centuries of secrecy. In a blinding flash, Tagle collapsed. The figures vanished. Silence fell. When the dawn broke, they found the cardinal unconscious.